the Proco Rat. Perfect pedal for cutting through the mix and pretty much announcing you're about to play some nasty crunch and tasty licks. But can it do the elusive liquid lead tone? Let's check it out. There it is, a classic. There are many iterations and modifications and boutique versions and boutique pedals that are versions but don't tell you that that's just what they are, is the Rat. But when it comes to what I use on my pedal board, it's just the good old Chinese Rat you can order for, I think it was around $75 last I checked. And it does what a Rat is supposed to do. Some people get really in the weeds with the op amp and, a vintage one from the 80s and all that. That's fine if there's a difference to them, but any kind of nuance like that is precluded by what I'm doing with the Rat personally. I introduce it for some nastiness, particularly with my humbucker guitars, is classically how I've used it. It almost gives me a feel that I'm getting a little bit of that JCM 800 chainsaw is kind of what I shoot for with it. Obviously, it's not going to sound like a JCM 800, but it kind of gets you in that zone. But increasingly, over the years, I've seen artists that use it to great effect for really thick, smooth lead tones. And I'm always on the quest for the liquid lead tone of my dreams. So, been giving this guy a different experience in a different lane to see what I can get out of it. I run the filter knob, which, why did they make the filter knob backwards on the Rat? The world will never know. But the further you turn it up clockwise, the bassier it gets. And I don't know if you can see my settings, but my filter is not all the way up to the bassy side, but it's not that far from it. That's where I live on the Rat, even doing rhythms and stuff like that. The Rat is somewhat polarizing because it's easy to get bad sounds out of. Turn the distortion up and it can get very fuzzy and respond somewhat like a fuzz. And I have mine, the distortion's a little below half, and with a guitar that has any heat in the pickups, you pretty much have what you need as far as distortion getting around the halfway point. Then filter knob, obviously, to taste, but if you get too far trebly with it, your Rat is going to sound like a castrated rat. Anyway, volume knob, whatever you're running it into, if you want to boost that, there's plenty on the volume knob to take your next gain stage into some more gain by how hot you're running the pedal. Can it do the liquid lead tone? Obviously, it's known to have a mid-forward and bass cutoff type of EQ curve. I'm going to look at it and look at some real-time EQs of me using this, as well as my standard liquid lead tone pedal, the SD9, Maxon Ibanez SD9, and we'll look at what the EQ tells us. You know, this is not a scientific test. However, it is a guitar bro science test, and we all know the best results come from guitar bro science. So let's check it out first in a mix used over a song that I'm going to play different solos with this pedal, the SD9, and also I even experimented running this into the SD9. One more kind of quirk about the Rat is the way it responds to rolling back the volume knob. Clean up in the traditional sense, like you think of with a fuzz face, it does not do. It's kind of interesting the way it responds. When you roll back the volume knob, it definitely rolls back the saturation of distortion, but the actual gain of the signal stays pretty ineffective. It may drop off a little bit, but it stays very strong signal wise really until you get pretty low on the volume knob, which is interesting that you can stack this by rolling back your volume knob to around even 3, 4, 5, and the saturation will reduce, but the gain of your signal from the Rat will still be very strong to impart its rattiness on whatever you're running it into. So some of what I'm looking at is how using the Rat in that manner affects the SD9 and the EQ and how it changes. So it's a little nerdy to pull up real-time EQs running different pedals into each other, and we all know that me and a lot of other guitar players, no matter what the distortion box is, we end up trying to dial them in to sound the same. So you're going to see some of that. But let's get a little guitar bro sciencey and see what this looks like through a real-time EQ. now we're going to look at the EQ response just outside of any kind of mix, just really the guitar by itself. And we'll look at the SD9 and then look at the EQ of the Rat. And then we will look at the EQ of stacking the Rat into the SD9, kind of with my volume knob roll down technique I'm using. I'm gonna first just play into my bass setup without either of the two distortion pedals on. So I kind of got a crunchy sound. That's really a sound I would never use on just the bridge pickup. With that, I would probably be in position 2 or 4. But anyway, I wanted you to have a base of where I'm at without introducing either distortion. And first, let's see what the SD9 is looking at. And I'll try to play something similar. I say I improvise, but that just means I'm too lazy to learn anything note from note. So I'll try to give a best representation of similar passages in each. So first we'll do the SD9 by itself. Alright, so that was the good old SD9, my go-to for liquid lead tone, or as close as I can get to it. Now we're going to look at a similar passage or similar playing using just the Rat. And I'm going to bend down real quick and switch these. My pedals aren't at my feet. Rat's not necessarily quieter, but different sounding hum for whatever that's worth. Alright, that was just the Rat, and it's kind of hard for me to play and eyeball the EQ at the same time. Definitely sounds brighter, obviously, even though you see from earlier in the video where I keep the filter knob. Similarly on the SD9, I'm rolling the tone almost all the way down, but definitely some more high end on the Rat and cutting off some of the bass. I felt and heard that and saw it a little bit on the EQ. But obviously I'm going to have to go back when I don't have a guitar in my hand and look at these EQs independently, and I'll come back with a little commentary on what I'm seeing. And next I'm going to do the Rat into the SD9, and I'm going to roll my volume knob back to probably around 4, and we'll see how much of the Rat characteristics peeks into what the SD9 does when it's after it. So I'm going to set that up now. That's definitely a lot noisier. And I've got my guitar volume knob all the way off, so that's a lot of noise just from the ground floor. But anyway, let's see what our real-time EQ curve looks like. Man, if it wasn't so noisy, just the amount of compression and saturation that gives you, it makes you want to just rip legato, because it's so stacked, but very noisy. Anyway, fun for guitar bro science. Don't know how useful this is going to be for making any kind of definitive judgments, but I'm going to take a look at this and then come back and see what I make out of all of it, and listening to it too, see where I'm at with it. So holler back in a second. All right. Well, what did we gather from our guitar bro science experiment on the Rat and comparing it to my favorite pedal? Just from a global standpoint, there were some things I was surprised of as far as the EQ from a distance wasn't super different. There wasn't like, you look at the EQ of the SD9, then you look at the EQ of the Rat, and you're like, oh. And it wasn't until I sat and watched them a couple times looking for specific things that I think I really saw where the differences were, and some of them are already, we know, because they're inherent to those pedals. obviously the Rat's always chopping off some low end. I was kind of surprised that none of my signal with any combination of pedals on the guitar is hitting really above 6K, but that does make sense. I typically like a dark, distorted guitar tone. I don't like treble. Me and treble don't get along. But that was very clear. So obviously the way I'm dialing in everything from the ground up, regardless of the pedal, has that going on. And what you really see with the SD9 is it's got some inherent response in those low mid areas, kind of 300 and to 500, and you know, that area that gives it that thickness, that weightiness, whereas the Rat is not gonna be really heavy-handed in those frequencies. What did surprise me about the SD9 is I saw very good mid representation. You know, especially during the solos, we're getting some good narrow Q mid spikes in the 1K 800 range, and that kind of surprised me. I didn't necessarily think of that as a mid forward pedal, and a lot of it is what I'm doing and what I'm playing, and the guitar, how I have it set up with the tone knob and all that. The Rat, it had those same characteristics with the mids, maybe a little higher and a little sharper responses when those narrow Q peaks would poke out on the Rat in that 800 to 1K range. They were a little more pronounced. I could really see it better on the solos I did with the music, and I think that was because, you know, I was soloing in a particular area on the guitar that enunciated those frequencies. So when you look at when I did that with the Rat, you could really see where it was pushing those mids, maybe a little more extremely than the SD9 was. Other observations, when I would do the chords, you know, I do like the type deal. That's where you would see maybe a little bit of, not a scoop, but you wouldn't see a big response in the mids on the SD9, and it was definitely there a little more presently on the Rat. And when I put the Rat into the SD9, it kind of filled in those gaps. And really, the Rat just had more high-end content. And, you know, like I said, I'm dropping off around 6K all the way around, but the Rat is got more frequency response going on from the mids out to that 6K range than the SD9, which, I'm setting that up to be a thick, dark pedal. And even though I was trying to use the Rat in the same way, it just naturally had more presence in those higher frequencies. So the takeaway for me, it goes back to the sounds. I like the sound of the SD9 better. It's more what I go for. It's thicker. The Rat, although I did like the way it sounded, that extra high end isn't necessarily something that I'm shooting for. But I do recognize how that could have its place if you're not cutting through and you throw the Rat in the mix. It's going to give you more of those spikes in the dead center mid range and more activity in that higher frequency range that I'm using. So I think in execution, I'll probably still use the Rat the same way that I have been, which is kind of like my step 2 of rhythm crunchiness. When I want that to stick out a little more, add the Rat to it. Gives a little more of a place to go over my bass tone, and I can control how saturated that's going to be with the volume knob. But like we talked about, because of the inherent nature of how the Rat acts with the volume knob, I'm not losing that much gain or strength on my signal. So it's a good range of step 2 when I want to get a little dirtier than my bass tone, like for power chords and stuff like that. It's really what I'm talking about. And then if I were ever in a situation where I was actually a real guitar player that played with other musicians, that not something I need for the bedroom, obviously. I think I would only stack the Rat into the SD9 if I just was getting buried and wasn't cutting through it all. Obviously, it's noisy as all get out, and it added so much compression and sustain just under my fingers that it made playing easy. But you also got to take into account when you're doing that, you better have your string muting game on point, or every little string that rings out and you don't mean to hit is also going to be just as pronounced. So if I was trying to solo on the good old SD9 and wasn't cutting through, I could see me hitting the Rat the way I have it set up, and just dialing my volume knob back enough where I'm not sounding like a black metal album, and I think that would put me over the top as far as sticking out. The sound of the two stacked together almost got that cocked wah thing going on, so it was not in and of itself in this kind kind of view where we're able to concentrate on the specific sounds and what they look like in the EQs. I don't know that that is like, oh, that's my sound. It's a very pronounced mid on top of mid, and it's just kind of an extreme version. But sometimes the extremes are in a mix what sounds the best, and you got to take the EQs and put them in their proper place. We need to use our ears and not our eyes. And if I like the way one sounds better than the other, that's what I'm going to go with. Not a super scientific experiment with a bunch of controls, and I'm sure anybody that knew how to conduct an actual audio engineering experiment would say I didn't do anything by opening up a EQ. But it was a fun little guitar bro science look at two pedals that are common, and they're always going to be on my pedal board, and came with a few takeaways from probably how I'm going to use those continuing forward. Hopefully somebody else may have gotten something out of it. If not, just the fun of nerding out and turning on different pedals and looking at EQs and acting like we're studying something. Just a little bit of guitar vacation fun. And that's really what this is all about. But I do think the Rat is an option for liquid lead tone. It may not be my first choice, but it could be the best choice in the right situation for whatever your rest of your playing environment is and where your guitar needs to sit in the mix. And that's really my conclusion. I'll end with a happy guitar vacation to you all. Until the next time, keep enjoying your guitar vacation. Later.